Okay, happy Hanuman Jayanti, but for the syllabus sake, International Biodiversity Day. Okay. Okay, let's start. So today's article is in the context of two important arenas. One is the marine landscape and how urbanization is impacting biodiversity. We are going to look at this article from two dimensions. One, ethics, two, governance. Because you had an induction into how to read newspapers for almost broadly all subjects: society, polity, economy, governance. What we are left with is ethics. So consider this as an orientation for learning ethical issues or how to interpret any newspaper article through the lens of ethics. Okay, let's start. Okay, what is biodiversity? Variety of species in a habitat. Good. What is ecosystem? Basics. Are you done with your environment classes? No. Okay. System. What is a system? Generally, we have already discussed in a basic systemic approach what is a system. There is an input, there is a process, and there is an output. This balance is what system is. In an ecosystem, you have some inputs to that system, will be outputs in terms of some let's say plant or life, anything, and then again it decays and becomes input and the cycle continues. So a system has cycles. What are those cycles, etc., will be discussed in the environment classes, but just understand that systems have cycles. Okay, balance is created when you respect the time taken for that cycle to be replenished. If you, let's say for example, if you take groundwater, groundwater should be extracted and then again given enough time to get rejuvenated, right, in the next season. So what is the importance of this? Because it is vital for ecological stability, climate resilience, and human well-being. Environment, climate resilience, which is geography aspect, and human well-being, which is the society, ethical, so basically human beings. Okay, it is also important for livelihoods. So the classic debate whenever we are discussing biodiversity issues is whether should we preserve our environment or go for an economic model that can impact environment. You carry out a mining activity, you carry out fishing activity, you create cities. For all of this you have to cut down trees. The latest Kancha Gachibowli issue, you are all aware what happened. Should we build a software park or should we conserve the forest? What is your answer? What is your answer? Historically, if you see, every single place, most probably including the one we are right now, once upon a time was probably a forest. So what does this tell you? human beings have always adopted a self-centric view. This self-centric view is called anthropocentric. Anthropocentric. Now, on the occasion of the International Day for Biodiversity, let us look at that. What is the theme? Be part of the planet. Be part of the plan for nature conservation. Okay. Is it important for you to by heart all this? Not necessarily. But sometimes the themes give you a sense of direction as to what will be the agenda for next few years. So be part of the plan, being a part, meaning the emphasis of this year's entire discourse will be about how we have to make every stakeholder involved in the plan. Just like how we talked about participative governance, participative democracy, biodiversity will also be protected only when people participate or all the stakeholders participate. What is the significance? It is the adoption date of Convention on Biological Diversity. What is this? You will see in your environment classes. Yeah. What is the Indian context? See, not just Indian context, anywhere across the world, the classic case of development versus ecology is again a case to the point. It is all the more important in the case of India because, one, India is a growing nation, the population pressure is going. Two, we have climate targets which go against each other. On one hand, we have the needs of growing population, on the other hand, we have to handle climate. Now, what is the legal framework for biodiversity? What is the philosophy? When I say philosophy, when you have any thought, it can go in multiple directions. You have to remove those distractions and focus on a pathway. There should be a guiding light. So, any legal framework that is created in India should be premised on Indian constitutional values. If you take a look at Article 48A, where will you find this? Right. Are you talking about rights in 48? DPSP. Okay. So state's duty to protect environment, and you also have a fundamental duty. Okay. Citizens' duty to protect nature. It's a two-way communication in the social contract between the individual and the state. So that's the first premise. Second one, you also have the Environmental Protection Act 1986, which is a legal mandate to preserve our environment. And then you also have other environmental legislations like Wildlife Protection Act, Pollution Act, etc., etc. Okay. Then you have the coastal regulation zones, which is all the more important in the context of marine biodiversity. See, in short, you need not know about the specific details, but coastal regulation zone, what does the name itself indicate? On the coastal areas, you can't build any infrastructure beyond a certain limit because it will disturb the marine biodiversity. It's as simple as that. Clear? And then you have the National Biodiversity Action Plan. Without having an action plan, you cannot do anything. So these are the policies and the legal measures and the constitutional provisions with a structure starting from the direction to the specifics. We started from the direction to the specifics. This is how I want you to structure your argument or your answers whenever you're talking about biodiversity. Or not just biodiversity, anything. Start from the philosophy, guiding philosophy, which is most important. Find that guiding philosophy in the constitution, then look at the relevant articles, or relevant laws, and then talk about policy measures, then talk about the gaps therein and how to fix it. This is the thought process flow, starting from the philosophy to the solution of the present day needs. Clear? Now, we are talking about an urban biodiversity crisis. Do I really have to explain? Look at the road outside, you'll understand it automatically. It just rained for a couple of hours last night. It felt like Ashok Nagar was almost drowning. And this is the situation. It's only getting worse. There's another article today in the Hindu, in the science section, which says that, climate change will make monsoons even more harsher. Not just monsoons, cyclones. Cyclones will get even worse. So, let's say, if this is the entire spread of our monsoon season, June, July, August, September, October. What's happening is, June, dry spell. July, dry spell. And then we thought we have a drought. And in a single day in August, entire 2 months, rain came down in 2 days. What is the impact it will have? Imagine you are starving for 2 months and you are on, almost on the verge of a deathbed, and then suddenly someone says that since you didn't eat from 2 months, I'll feed you all that food in 1 day. Do you think you can digest it? No, right? Same thing. It should be evenly accessible. And that's how usually nature is. But something is wrong with our nature. Nature is not wrong. Something is wrong with human beings. The argument they say is that something is wrong with our nature. Again, anthropocentric. People refuse to accept that there is something wrong with our way of living. This is where we have to fix the problem. So what are the problems here? Rapid expansion. Take a look at any city. The other day, the Chief Minister of Telangana, he was mentioning how skyscrapers were being built without planning for adequate roads, adequate drainage, adequate planning, and that will cause a lot of problem. Fair enough. So, if you are building such tall skyscrapers, and imagine if work from home is remote and all the people come out at the same time. Do you think we have the capacity to handle such huge traffics? Like, let's say for example, if you have to walk from Ashok Nagar to probably RTC Crossroad, it's hardly 1 kilometer. You can walk. But what if you remove your vehicle, you take out your vehicle and you remove all the barriers there? Do you think you can control the crowd? Impossible. This is what is happening, rapid expansion, and this phenomenon is called leapfrog development, where one part of the city is developed, then the surrounding area should be evenly developed, right? How does a frog leap? It takes jump. So from this area, this middle area is skipped, and then they start the development elsewhere. There is no connectivity here and there. It's like you see one rich area, then on the side of it there is one slum, and then another rich area. Why is this inconsistency in development? It's because of lack of planning. rapid urban expansion, which is taking away core biodiversity enclaves like wetlands, lakes, trees are cut down, which is causing ecological destruction due to rapid expansion. That's one factor. Green space inequality. This is an ethical issue. Inequality is a metric that we usually talk in terms of economy. Shivaji movie, you remember, again I keep quoting that. There is a famous dialogue, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Simplest definition of inequality, rising inequality. One dimension of that rising inequality is environmental inequality. Meaning, why is it that some people have access to clean air in cities and the other part is not? What was supposed to be a norm, that is access to clean air, green tree cover, clean environment, which is the natural habitat for human beings if we were living in consonance with nature. Why is it becoming a luxury? You will have some townships being promoted as urban green spaces. When did having trees become a luxury? Why did it even become a luxury? See, you must be wondering, like, you're not supposed to feel guilty about this, but in our own small ways, if we start changing. I was no different when I started my preparation. I did not think about it at all. We did not know what is the impact of cutting down trees. I thought it's a tree, it's coming in the way, so we have to current wires and all the poles should be accommodated, so we have to cut it down. As casually as that. It's only when we started preparing for this exam when we realized so much is happening. But even after that, 20-25 years of conditioning cannot change overnight. I'm not expecting change from you overnight. Even I used to be very casual about littering waste on the roads. It changed over a period of time. So our attitudes towards environment and the environmental damage that we might do will start changing slowly when you're aware. So people should be made aware of the impact. And this green space inequality is a very big problem. We don't have public parks. Planning deficits, unregulated constructions, low environmental literacy, everything. Okay? And this low environmental literacy is not just with people but also the governing officials. Even they are not trained to deal with these impacts proportionately. For example, we'll talk about some case studies that are picked. We have Chennai's Biodiversity Initiative, where they recognize the problem of ecological degradation in the urban core, especially after the 2015 flood-like situation, which had a massive rain almost 10 years ago. Okay, so there was expert collaboration. They partnered with one trust called the Care Earth Trust. You can use this as case studies, otherwise it will be difficult to remember. This is the value addition that you can take from newspapers, quoting examples like this. Care Trust Earth partnered with the city officials. What for? Strategy development. They created city biodiversity strategy and an action plan. After this, 3 years later, in 2018, and they started working towards green space accessibility standards. Why am I quoting all this? We discovered the problem. First we started with the definition, then we saw the evolution, then we spoke about policy measures. Now we are talking about a case study. Similarly, let's take a look at the marine arena. So the first takeaway from the editorial page, the first editorial on the upper end of the Hindu editorial page is this. Take a case study, note it down in your notes. Problem, solution. We need a hyper local solution with a global level vision. Hyper local but with a global level vision. Take the best cases across the world, try to implement it in your locality, partner with anyone and everyone who can give you that solution. That's the funda. But the nature of marine areas, high seas, is slightly different, because it is not a resource which is owned by one country, and secondly, responsibility of high seas, that is the sea which is beyond national borders. Nobody was taking any responsibility for those areas. Last year itself there was a treaty, okay, on what to do with that high seas, how to conserve the biodiversity in those regions, and yet it's not just enough. So what are the ethical dimensions here we have to consider, etc., we will see. But before that, let's briefly describe the problem statement here of marine areas. Firstly, it is a conflict between fisher folk, that is fishermen who depend on this, and the environmental destruction it causes. If they indiscriminately use the marine resources, they will have nothing to do in the future, and that is the problem of sustainability. You almost have 40 lakh fishermen on the coast of our country whose livelihoods depend on the marine biodiversity. If you don't address this problem, their livelihoods is also in danger, because a lot of fish get killed. The statistic from that article says that there is a 41% drop in the catch, which is impacting their livelihood. And India has 7,500 kilometers of coastline. However, if you take a look at the Survey of India report, on coastline, you will see that this number is changed recently. It is 11,000, roughly around 11,000 something, because it changed the methodology of our coastline, and most of our textbooks are still here. Even official articles like this are also quoting the old data itself. Okay. Previously they had a methodology where they were looking at it in a straight line. For example, Gujarat. So previously this was the calculation method. Now they are taking along the curves completely. So that was the difference in methodology. This was way back in 1970s, and now you have updated technology. So coastline definition also changed. But we will see when these changes will come into the picture in official data. Till then, let's just get fixated on this. Alright. So this is the statistical problem, the description of the problem statement through statistics. So why are we facing this overfishing crisis? First and most important is the mechanization. See, there is something called bottom trawling. This is the ocean, let's say, for example. Okay. When you go for trawling, means fishing, you cast the net. A huge net is cast here, which is captured by a boat. Everything that is there in this is taken from the bottom of the ocean sometimes. Like, if you might be wondering, when I say bottom of the ocean, initially, let's say for example on the eastern side, Bay of Bengal, it's very shallow, and then it goes into the ocean. Most of the times you will have to not cross the international borders, which is a crime. You should not enter into anybody else's territory. So here the fishing availability was very high. Somehow because of this mechanized trawling, where you are taking everything from the bottom. But the problem is only some fish quality is good enough to be exported. Rest of them will be dumped back into the ocean again, but that will create more rot. It will disturb the ecology. Non-targeted species. Okay, and economic impact of this overall problem is that fishing is becoming unviable. And then sometimes because of biodiversity getting disturbed, the smaller catch, smaller fish, they are not economically viable. They are linked to this economic impact, and they are not getting the same kind of returns on the risk that they are taking. Okay, so this is the overall issue, the economic impact and the overall overfishing issue. So when you are dealing with ethics, we have discussed the problem of urbanization, we have discussed the problem of marine biodiversity. The common framework for both these issues in terms of ethics, this is the stakeholder analysis that I am talking about. See, firstly, if you see in the case of urban local bodies, you will have an ethical dilemma. In case of citizens, fisher folk, the real estate developers and the future generations, all of them are stakeholders. For each of those stakeholders in the problem, you will have a corresponding ethical dilemma. Your ability to frame an argument as a dilemma in terms of ethics is what gets you marks in ethics paper. Okay. For example, urban local bodies. In terms of urban local bodies, what are their interests? They want real estate development, economic development. But what is the development dilemma they have? Ecological destruction, social equity. Kancha Gachipoli, classic case to the point. Citizens, what do they want? Urban amenities, good housing. But they also want their mental well-being, their environmental risks like heat island. You don't want heat islands, right? Let's say you are buying a 30 crore villa in a nice place, and then suddenly you realize it became a concrete jungle. Would you not regret paying 30 crore for that villa? Obviously you will. So what was available to everyone now became a luxury. Mental well-being and avoiding environmental problems will now come at a premium for citizens, which will again further inequality. So this is a dilemma we have. Now let's say in the case of fisher folk, they want their livelihood to be taken care of, their tradition to be respected. But what is the dilemma they have? The fear of marginalization, that they will no longer have the same kind of a lifestyle, and they are facing an ecological injustice according to them. How do we give them a balance here? Because that is all they knew, and they were not intentionally doing anything wrong. But when you say in the last 6 years the 41% of the catch is reduced, they are not aware of what went wrong. They are confused, struggling to find an answer. That's what you need to focus on. Now developers, they want profit, they want infrastructure. But the ethical dilemma is sometimes they will have to bypass law, accountability under law. That's their ethical dilemma. Should we or should we not breach law? Future generations. Future generations are not yet here. Our actions will impact them. So the ethical dilemma for future generations is slightly different. We are supposed to feel that dilemma. Will we be in a place to give them intergenerational equity? Meaning, whatever we enjoy today, can we give it to the future generations? That's a question we need to ask. And if we were to place ourselves in the feet of the future generations, the question they will have is, the biggest question they will have is this present lifestyle sustainable for our environment? So this is the stakeholder analysis. Identify the value and the dilemma. Your ability to identify what is value, it is not good, bad, all those judgments. Value is our preference. I'll just give you a brief explanation of ethics. Value, morals, ethics. All of them are decision making frameworks only. Think of them like this. How will you take a decision? Your end decision should always create stability in a society. So whatever you value should also create internal stability. This is the guiding light. Okay. So for example, if you are a vegetarian, your value says that we should not eat non-vegetarian for our own mental peace. But if you think it should be the norm in the society, that will create conflict. So having a clear-cut difference between what is your personal wish and what is social wish will create that balance. So value is our preference. It is neither good nor bad. Your understanding about that issue, your own understanding, it's morality. Clear? It's morality. When you impose a judgment on a certain value, this is a good value, this is a bad value, that becomes a moral judgment. There is a reasoning behind it. But that reasoning need not be accepted by the entire society. When it is entirely accepted by the society, that moral becomes ethics. Ethics is the social acceptance of a certain norm as desirable or undesirable, and there is a reasoning behind it. You got my point? Moral and ethics. Ethics and morals, both of them are frameworks. This is personal, this is social. Whether we want something or reject something, this is the framework. Clear? To judge something, when you are calling it an ethical dilemma, these are the dilemmas that everyone can feel, because we all know these are justified. So that is what you need to know. Stakeholder analysis. It's all the more important in case studies. What other ethical perspectives you should know? You will have some theories. When you are reading ethics, in the ethics classes, whoever is going to take your ethics classes, you will have some theories. What is the use of an ethical theory if you can't put it into use? Right? So, many theories which are from ancient times to present times, you will get a lot of those theories. But unless and until you see some practical utility of those theories, ethics is of no use. So whatever theories you learn in the class, always try to link it to present day problems. See, for example, you will have virtue ethics, utilitarian ethics, deontological ethics. All of these are ethical frameworks taken from ancient wisdom. If you use them as a moral argument to put forward your point, that will give you marks. If you are impractical, you won't get marks. If you are purely general and generic without showing your prowess in ethical theory, again you won't get mark. You write both but don't quote an example, you won't get mark. So all of this, all the tick boxes should be ticked. Now what is virtue ethics? What is ethics? It's a framework of what is right and wrong. Virtue ethics is a framework where some desirable values which are considered to be virtues, good virtues, if you stick to those values, like say for example empathy, integrity, when you imbibe those values in your policy choices, you become ethical. That is virtue ethics in a very simplistic way. Utilitarian ethics. Maximum good for maximum people. What is the utility of this? Practical. There is a practical or pragmatism. Pragmatic theory. Okay. And then you have deontological ethics. Come what may. Once I decide this is the right thing to do, I will not change my stance. So you should know which theory should be used in what context. What is the deontological argument for environmental sustainability? We have only one earth. We cannot destroy it. Utilitarian theory. Okay, we might be destroying some part of the environment, but it's also creating livelihood. We have no other option. But we have to move towards a nature-based solution. Utilitarian. Virtue ethics. We empathize with the fisher folk problem. Let's try to address them. And within our policy choices, we should have certain virtues. Virtue ethics. So, you can use this framework of thought for any ethical issues. It's called the preserve framework. P stands for policy, R for rights of vulnerable, E for ecological rationale, stakeholder analysis, and you will have for the policy recommendations going forward. So I just gave preserve to remember, PRES. Ignore the rest of the words, but just focus on PRES. This is how the entire argument was structured in today's lecture. Okay? Now with this framework, I expect you to read the 2 articles. You'll get much more clarity. In the second editorial, there is a specific case study about New Zealand, fisher folk. There is a quota management system in New Zealand to deal with fishermen problem. Okay? So read about things like this. Now you will know exactly what to look for in the article when you read a article through this framework. Okay? So that's it for today. We'll meet again tomorrow.